Welcome in, everybody. Glad as always that you are along back from Portugal and some R&R bike trip there was awesome. I highly recommend if you're looking for a vacation somewhere to go to Portugal. Did not see a cloud for 10 days. Temperature was warmer than I thought. It was in the low 80s most days, and it was spectacular. I mean, feel refreshed. In fact, I wish I was still there in some regards. That's why we took the week off last week. A lot going on, but first I want to thank my sponsors. First at Huntington Bank. They're everywhere in town in our state, and they're doing a marvelous job of taking care of the client and giving you a lot of options from a banking standpoint. So I could not recommend them any higher. So go check them out. And we're presented by Huntington, where banking just clicks. Try asterisk free checking with no monthly maintenance fee, no matter what. It's your money. So keep more of it. Make the switch today at huntington.com/yourmoney. That's good folks at Huntington Bank. And also the great folks at Stihl, STIHL, StihlUSA.com. And you'll find all sorts of wonderful products to help keep your property in pristine condition. Blowers, mowers, trimmers, hedge trimmers. It's amazing how many products they have. They keep creating more. Told you about the handsaw I have. It's great if you're going camping. And maybe this time of year you can still go camping. A little cooler out at night, but you can take down and break up some firewood, and you bring this little handsaw, and you have a mini chainsaw. They have a ton of large chainsaws as well, but Stihl, check them out, STIHL, the good folks at StihlUSA.com. All right, so yesterday I went to the Bronco game, and I have to tell you that years ago I used to go to every Bronco game. I did the Gridiron Grill, for those that remember, the post-game radio show, and I can't even recall how many years I did that, 4 years, 5 years, somewhere in that time frame in the 90s. So I was at then Mile High Stadium every game, and occasionally with them out on the road, covered some of their Super Bowls, etc. But, things evolve in this business, and I don't go down there that frequently. But I reached out to the Broncos. I said, you know what, I'm going to go with the Broncos playing the Giants. And you all know that I root for the Broncos to win every week, except if they are playing the New York Football Giants, because it takes me back to my youth, and I have a strong allegiance still to the Giants, even as bad as they've been the last several years. They've been hard to watch. So it's exciting that the Giants now look like they have a quarterback finally in Jackson Dart. Anyhow, so I go down to Empower Field for the first time in a while to take in the game, and I stumble upon one of the greatest games in the history of the Broncos, one of the great comebacks in the history of the NFL, as you know, 33-32, the Broncos win. They're getting shut out 19-0 to begin the fourth quarter. The first team in NFL history to win a game that they were down by 18 or more with 6 minutes left. And somehow the Giants effed it up. But the Broncos deserve a lot of credit. They could do next to nothing against that Giant defense for 3 quarters. In fact, at halftime, I think they had 101 yards with their first 8 possessions. There were 6 punts. There was 1 possession that ended on downs where they moved it deep into Giant territory. And then they had one before the half where they actually went backwards. They were getting nothing done. And then, Bo Nix made a couple plays. There was the nice fortunate deflection in the end zone for the freaky touchdown. The Giants kind of had one of their own in the ensuing drive. But Bo Nix in the fourth quarter, and I'm sure you've read about this already, he becomes the first player in the history of the NFL to have 2 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns in the fourth quarter of a game. And the Giant kicker cooperates and misses 2 extra points and gives the Broncos an opportunity to win it. Great win. Phenomenal win for the Broncos. And there's going to be a lot of liars out there that say they went to the game and hung in for all 60 minutes when, in fact, I was there, and I looked up from the press box, and there were a lot of empty seats after the Giants were ahead 19-0, and then after the Giants scored to kind of maintain their 3-score lead with 6 minutes to go. And I guess it's somewhat understandable. It was going to be a Bronco loss. I mean, there was a 99.5% chance that the Giants were going to win. So it was an unbelievable comeback, and now the Broncos are 5-2. I think it was fitting, given the fact that earlier at halftime, the great Demaryius Thomas's name was put up as it should in the Ring of Fame at Empower Field, and his where all the Ring of Famers are outside the stadium. I was going to say his bust, but it was revealed with his folks there, and the biggest contingent of alumni in quite some time. Peyton Manning's Super Bowl 50 championship team was there, so it was great to see all of that. It was great to see DT honored, and he's somebody that I got to know just a little bit when he played. I was still covering the Broncos back then when I was working at the Fan. And, great guy. I mean, truly was. And what a tragedy. What a tragedy that he's gone and, in his early 30s. But I thought everything worked out for the Broncos in celebrating DT, and then that crazy comeback. It's an all-timer. The only one that rivals it, remember a few years ago, the Broncos were down, what were they out? 4 touchdowns at halftime in San Diego, or 24-0. Wasn't it 24-0? And they come back and they win 28-24. I remember watching that one going, holy shit, did this really happen? Well, that's the same thing as I was watching there in the fourth quarter. Though, I'm not going to lie, it pained me a little bit because, my Giants are finally looking like a NFL football team. But you know what? In the grand scheme of things, not going to happen for them probably this year. But as I said, they finally have a quarterback in Jackson Dart, and looks like they're heading in the right direction. So now the Broncos are 5-2, and they're in a good place. But I listened to Sean Payton after the game, and he was right. He was kind of, I don't want to say he wasn't melancholy, but I think he was still somewhat in shock that they won, quite frankly. And he pointed out that we're going to enjoy this tonight, which I know is a coach's cliche, and then we're going to get after it tomorrow. He said, but there's a lot of things to cover. And if you're a Bronco fan, you're looking at it realistically. For 7 quarters, offensively, they scored 13 points. I mean, they were awful in London against the Jets, as you know, escaped with a win. And then they pull off the miracle yesterday. But that offense was miserable. Now, Bo Nix was really good in the fourth quarter. He was accurate, especially in that last drive. From a Giant perspective, that probably shouldn't happen. But give Bo Nix a lot of credit. But overall, you can mask some issues when you just look at the fact that the Broncos won the last 2 weeks. They do have some issues offensively, and I think Sean Payton was pointing that out in his lengthy press conference following that ball game, far lengthier than normal, because not only the shock, but I think the realization that they have a lot of work to do. The other thing about the NFL, really quickly, we always want to formulate quick opinions and prognostications based on 1 week of play or 2 weeks of play. Kansas City looks pretty good again, don't they? I mean, they were buried early in the season. They're done. Their run's over. They're no good. Look pretty damn good again. And you can go around the league and point to some other teams. I mean, I thought Baltimore would be great. They're going to get Lamar Jackson back. We'll see if they can go on a run. Buffalo looked like they were never going to lose a football game. We know they have. So, it's the NFL. It's kind of week to week. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is, I always fall back on the Bill Parcells line. You are what your record says you are, and the Broncos are 5-2, and that's a good record in the National Football League. I had the great joy yesterday watching the game with Jim Saccomano. And I think many of you know who Jim Saccomano is. Certainly if you followed the Broncos. If you've lived here and followed sports, you know who Jim Saccomano is. He's the humble and former great head of media relations for the Denver Broncos, revered in the industry, not just in the NFL. Uh, a multi-decade career leading the Broncos PR department, and he still goes on home Sundays to the games. And I see Sacco periodically, but it'd been a while, and we ended up sitting together for the entirety of the game. What a joy that was for me! What a special afternoon on top of watching, what turned out to be a great football game. It was, we were, sharing stories and talking about, former Broncos and some of his favorites and some instances that I was unaware of. And you deal with so many things as a media relations director of a professional team, especially if that team has more than 50 players on it. And, your phone can ring at any time. You're at the beck and call of the head coach. And, as Sacco pointed out, you're trying to please so many different people. So, if an athlete is requested, a prominent athlete, maybe the quarterback is requested by a member of the media, and maybe it's a prominent member of the media, big newspaper or, a big television entity, and they want to turn it down, and you try to convince them they got to go do it. And then the head coach doesn't want them to do too much or say too much. So you have to make sure you massage that relationship. And then if the media entity doesn't get as much time as they would like with that individual, they can be pissed off at you. I mean, it's a fascinating job, and it's a pressure-packed job. But more than anything, Jim Saccomano, who has such great humility and so many great stories, and you've seen him on television telling those stories about the Broncos. What a special treat it was, for me to spend some time with an old friend and sit there for 3.5 hours and watch a football game, watch a Bronco game together, and commiserate. So hats off to the great Jim Saccomano. That really that made my weekend. Staying in the football world, Colorado State, not surprisingly, fired Jay Norvell on Sunday. I had spoken about Jay Norvell a bunch over the last few years, in the last couple of weeks. And I go way back. I'm on record as saying that I thought it was a great hire. I mean, he did great things at Nevada with not the facilities and not the overall program that Colorado State presented. And I thought that he would be able to take Colorado State to a new level, to maybe a Boise State type of level. That's what they aspire to among the group of five. Obviously, it did not happen. And they had the nice win where they were +4 in turnover ratio against, a mediocre Fresno State team 2 weeks ago. And then they lose in front of a sellout crowd, the largest crowd ever at Canvas Stadium. More than 40,000 showed up for a team that's not been any good. So I guess John Weber, their AD, and their marketing department, they deserve a lot of credit. The fans deserve the most credit. They show up, and they lay an egg against Hawaii. It's more what we've seen in the past. They lose 31-19. Their offense is moribund. It's not what was promised, where they're throwing the ball all over the lot. They're not good at anything offensively. And it became time. You knew it was going to happen at the end of the year, and they were right in doing it right now. And I have a lot of respect for Jay Norvell. Anybody who's been around him will say class guy. Anybody who's been around him will say, a guy who really cares about his kids, who cares about his coaches, is about the right things. Both can be true. He didn't get it done, though. And now moving forward, you're going to hear all kinds of names thrown about. I heard one, the Klein kid, remember the quarterback at Kansas State, who was a really good player, out of Loveland, Colorado, and now he's an O coordinator down at Texas A&M, well thought of coach. Don't know a lot about him. He's from Loveland. I saw his name brought up in an article. That's all well and good. And I just think you cannot look at this position, if you're Colorado State, and say, we want to hire, our next Sonny Lubick, who's there for 15, 20 years and is a big-time winner. If that were to occur, wonderful. But don't be afraid to hire a coach that is young and dynamic and is gone in 4 years because he wins a lot. Because once you build the program to that level, it's easier, not always, but to sustain it if you think that, or if you worry about, we need to get somebody that, in their 50s or even 60s, and we don't want them to leave Colorado State. If they're really good, they're going to leave because, newsflash, as much as I love Colorado State, they're a mid-major. And that's where they are right now. And they can talk about going to the Pac-12. Guess what? The Pac-12 is a nice brand. The Pac-12 doesn't exist anymore. The Pac-12 that you and I watched, that when we think about fondly, it was USC in football leading the parade, and then more recently Oregon. It was Washington. It was UCLA. That was the Pac-12. Those teams ain't in there anymore. So I saw what Sean Keeler wrote in the Post the other day. It's the Mountain West Plus, and that's basically what it is. It's the new Mountain West. Some of the teams in the Mountain West are staying behind, and several of them are moving on to what will be the new Pac-12. If it was the old Pac-12, the dollars that they would command from a television standpoint would be a Power 5 level. It's not going to be that way. What they should aspire to in Fort Collins, and I know they have in the past, and they haven't come close to getting there, is Boise State. Boise State has sustained top of the Group 5 stature for more than a generation now. And they've done it while losing coaches. Remember Brian Harston, he left to take a big-time job at Auburn. Didn't work out there, as we know. Peterson went to the University of Washington. What happened, though, each time one of those named coaches left for a bigger-time job, the next guy stepped up. And the next guy maintained a level of excellence at Boise State. That's what you hope happens at Colorado State. So don't worry about if the coach they hire is 38 and is a really hot commodity and is gone in 3 or 4 years because all of a sudden he flips Colorado State and they start winning 9 games a year. That'll be okay. Bid them farewell. Because hopefully the next guy will continue that. It's a desirable job for a young coach. It's so funny in this age of social media. I saw some people, I don't know what they were drinking, say, the CSU should go out and get James Franklin. Are you freaking kidding me? James Franklin's going to have the pick of all the big-time jobs that are coming available. Billy Napier just got fired at Florida. Virginia Tech is open. There's going to be a number of jobs that are available that you truly can win a national championship, and that's what James Franklin's going to pursue. He's not sliding down the mountain where he's going to take a quote-unquote mid-major job. Do I think it's a good mid-major job? I do. I really do think it's a good mid-major job. But they have to get all the things I'm unaware of behind the scenes, the NIL, how much money they're going to be able to pay players, because recruiting is completely different, as we all know now. And you're going to read about all these kids jumping in the portal in January from Colorado State, from this year's team. But, that's, again, where we are in college football. But it's a good job. It was necessary at this point in time to move on from Jay Norvell, especially as they embark on the new Pac-12. Baseball. Tonight, because I'm taping this on Monday, tonight will be Game 7 between Toronto and Seattle. Got to love Game 7. Is there anything better in sport than a Game 7? It'll be a lot of fun. I'm pulling for, not that I really care deeply, but I'm pulling for Seattle. Seattle has never won a pennant So therefore, they'd never been in a World Series. Toronto has. They went back-to-back World Series in the early 90s, as most of you know. It would be nice to see Seattle there take on the vaunted Dodgers. The Dodgers, after kind of stumbling their way through the season after a wonderful start, remember they were the team that was going to win 130 games and ruin baseball, as Dave Roberts reminded everybody in the post-game celebration after they swept the Milwaukee Brewers. The Dodgers are playing like the team that everyone in the sport feared. They've lost one game in the postseason so far. They've gotten great length out of their rotation. Their bullpen, which was a mess, they said, no problem. We'll put the kid Sasaki at the back end. He's like, yeah, fine. I'll throw 100 miles an hour with that great split late in games. And he's handled that aplomb. And then there's that Shohei Ohtani guy. So I was in Europe still, and I didn't get to watch the games. I woke up because the games were taking place in the middle of the night over there. I woke up and I read that Ohtani struck out 10 and 6+ and hit 3 home runs. And not just any old home runs. His second home run literally went out of Dodger Stadium, which never happens. And some people reached out on social media, and I know it was a point of conversation on many sports talk shows, especially those that do dabble in baseball, that was this the greatest single, not just baseball performance, was this the greatest single athletic performance in a game we've ever witnessed? And a couple of thoughts. One, before I answer the question I just posed, I'm very fortunate to go to games all the time. And it's rare that I look at something from afar, whether it be a football game or a hoop game or a hockey game, and go, boy, I wish I was there. Because I enjoy it on television. And I enjoy not having to be in the craziness. But that was one, even though I don't have a dog in the hunt, that Dodger game, watching Ohtani strike out 10 and hitting 3 monstrosities of a home run, or 3 monstrous home runs, better way to phrase it. My first thought was, I wish I was there to feel the energy of Dodger Stadium as he was putting on that performance. Now to my original question, or not mine, everybody's original question. Is it the greatest single performance ever? Well, off the top of my head, you can talk about Wilt's 100 points in Hershey, Pennsylvania, which basically nobody saw. If you keep feeding a guy the basketball and they're ridiculously talented offensively, and Wilt Chamberlain was such a freak, something like that could occur. It's not to diminish what a great performance that was, or the 81 points that we saw Kobe, the late Kobe Bryant, score in a game. Phenomenal performances. This is the greatest because of how unique this cat is. He's one of one. He is one of one. The first analogy I thought of would be take the game we started this podcast with, the Bronco Giant game. So Bo Nix, who was less than pedestrian the first 3 quarters, sets the NFL record for scoring 2 touchdowns. I don't know if you count this as a record, but it's never happened before. 2 touchdowns rushing, 2 touchdowns throwing in the fourth quarter. Great, phenomenal. Turns out to be a great day for Bo Nix. The only way it would compare to what we just witnessed from Shohei Ohtani is, also, did you see that Bo Nix went out and played free safety, had a dozen tackles, and had an interception that he returned for a touchdown? That's the analogy. That's the metaphor. Ohtani dominant on the mound as a starter, not coming in relief and having, getting 3 outs and maybe striking out the side. And the dude struck out the side in the first and then hit a homer in the postseason. I think it's the greatest single performance we've ever seen. He's the greatest baseball player ever. He's greater than Babe Ruth, because when Babe Ruth was pitching, he wasn't the dominant offensive hitter, the offensive player that he eventually became. He's the greatest baseball player ever. period. And that was the single greatest game ever in sport. No one else does this. It's not like, oh, there are 4 or 5 other guys that also pitch and they hit. Nobody else does. Crazy. And you know what? I just thought of this. There was no stolen bases involved because he hit 3 home runs. He had a walk later in the game. I don't blame Pat Murphy for not pitching to him later on. But he also is damn fast. He can score from first on a double. He stole 50-plus bases last year, as you know. He's a friggin' freak. And we were reminded again a few days ago. So I did want to mention that on Ohtani. Crazy, right? Crazy. Will anybody beat the Dodgers? Keep this in mind, though, because Game 7 is taking place tonight. The Dodgers will have been off for, 7-8 days when the World Series begins on Friday, and we'll see if it has the Rockies effect from 2007. But clearly the Dodgers are playing like the team that was feared back in spring training. And it's not all about the fact that they can outspend everyone. Is that helpful? Obviously, that's helpful. But they've done a hell of a job in their trades. They've done a hell of a job in player development. And that's what gets through seasons, especially one with the myriad of injuries that they had, and allows them still to be a mid-90s win team and set themselves up for the postseason where not just the stars, it wasn't just the Ohtanis, Freddie's done his thing, Mookie Betts has done his thing, but they always seem to get contributions from Teoscar Hernandez, who had not as good a year this year as he did a year ago, but he hits postseason homers. Tommy Edman, all of a sudden, he always turns into a mini slugger in the postseason. So they're an interesting team, clearly, and it'll be fun to watch the World Series. It'll be fun to watch Game 7 tonight between Toronto and the Mariners up north of the border. The Rockies' search for a head of baseball operations continues. There's a couple of things. There's not a lot to talk about here, obviously, but there's a couple of things that I do like that have clearly transpired. One, they are interviewing multiple candidates. It's not, well, we got 3 candidates. We're just going to interview 3 and we're going to pick one. That had, it's come out that at least 3 have already interviewed. So they are truly doing a deep and widespread search. And what comes with that, and they're also keeping it close to the vest. We don't need to know who the names are. It'll all come out in due time. But one thing that also happens, and when you are doing a search like this and going through multiple interviews, there'll only going to be one guy who gets the job, and then he's going to be able to hire, one would assume, his people. But you're talking to and gathering information and ideas that others have who may not get the job for a variety of reasons, just because they finished second. But you can take maybe some of those ideas and also implement them as the Rockies look to redo, from a baseball operations standpoint, what they've done. So, I'm applauding the fact that it seems to be a fairly exhaustive search, and that's a good thing. That was necessary, clearly, as we know. Also, they're going to hire chief financial officer. That's good. I mean, you want to divvy up responsibilities, and you want to let people be an expert in their given area. When you do your homework and you hire really good people, you let them do their thing until, there's a bunch of red flags, right? And the same thing hopefully will happen on the baseball operations side. I would imagine that we will know in the not too distant future, the next week to 10 days, 2 weeks, who that person is, because the GM meetings are in mid-November, kind of early mid-November. in Major League Baseball. At the conclusion of the World Series is when free agency begins. So you want somebody clearly that has an office by then and has began the process of putting together their infrastructure. So I would think in the next several days, what that means, whether it's 6 days, 8 days, 10 days, 12 days, somewhere in that time frame, we'll have a name. And we'll go from there. We'll obviously try to get that person on or try to get some sound from that person and talk more about it when we learn of that. All right, before we get on out of here, the Avs are off to a great start. And you know how much I love the Colorado Avalanche and how exciting they are to watch with Makar and McKinnon and the whole group. That just is off to a wonderful start. But it's in contrast, if you recall, to last year where they got off to an awful start. Remember, they started 0-4, and ultimately they were fine. You knew they were going to be in the postseason. But I think this is important that this group, which is, has their holdovers, the superstars, but, now Brock Nelson, full camp as a member of the Avalanche, full camp for Marty Netchis, Nichushkin, further removed from some of the issues of the past, and they're playing really good hockey out of the gate. Not worried about the power play because I listened to Jared Bednar. I haven't really been able to see him as much. I saw him a little bit early on, but as you know, I was away. I'm looking forward to watching him on Tuesday night, but they're creating a lot of chances. They're limiting their opponents, so grade A start for the Avs, and soon the Nuggets will start. They open up against Golden State, so I'm excited to see that. The only comment I have there is there's always positive vibes this time of year for all teams, but the expectations are, NBA championship again, just like the Avalanche, Stanley Cup champion or bust, and that's the mood and the vibe that is emanating from downtown when it comes to the Nuggets. So I'll be looking forward to watching them get going. All right, I think I've covered most everything I was going to cover on my return from Portugal. Great to visit with all of you again. Buffs will be back in action this week, so we'll be talking a little bit about that. The Broncos continue on, more about that, and who knows what will pop up in sports. Anyhow, take care, stay well, be well, take care of one another, and we'll do it again in 7 days. See you.